Hi, I'm Pat Keegan, and welcome to the shop. In this video, we continue where we left off building the cabinet carcasses for the cabinets that will be mounted above the stove in our kitchen project. As you can see, I've gone ahead and built one of the cabinets already so that I can point out a few things to you that you can keep in mind as we construct the next parts of the cabinet. The first thing that you might notice is that I've drilled shelf pin holes to receive these shelf pins that hold up the shelves. There's many different kinds of these shelf pins. It's really a matter of personal preference. I tend to use these thicker 1/4 inch brass ones. There's different kinds that have different types of holding systems. It's really a matter of preference. Some of them have a screw in the bottom that you can actually drive a screw through into the shelf to keep it from moving if there's going to be a problem with the shelf coming out of the cabinet. In this particular design of the cabinet, the face frame will overlap the interior of the cabinet by 1/4 inch. So I'm not worried that a shelf is going to slide out. So I don't need to put screws up through these to hold them in. I'll simply use the very basic 1/4 inch shelf pin. On this side of the cabinet, you can tell that I've already gone ahead and drilled these pocket holes. These pocket holes will be used to receive the face frame that will go on the front of the cabinet. As you can see, the face frame will be put up here and the pocket screw will be drilled through here, anchoring the face frame to the front of the cabinet. If I flip the cabinet over and I show you the top of the cabinet, which is identical to the bottom of the cabinet, you can see that again I've drilled several pocket holes and driven pocket screws into the sides and the back of the cabinet. I also have 2 screws up here that'll be used to drill into the face frame as well to anchor the face frame at all points around the cabinet front. With that in mind, the first thing that we're going to do in our next cabinet is we're going to drill the holes in the sides. Before I drill the holes inside the wall of the cabinet to receive our shelf pins, I'd like to show you a couple of tools that come in handy to help me get this job done. The first is a simple piece of plexiglass with holes drilled at intervals of about 1.25 inches. This is clamped to the workpiece, and then along with this specialized drill bit, I'm able to drill my shelf pin holes nice and even. This particular drill bit that I have is simply a steel collar with a spring, and the drill bit rides in the middle. As I push down on this, the drill bit will go into the work, but it will stop after a certain point to the proper depth that's set by the bit. This prevents the drill from going all the way through the workpiece, coming out the other side, and ruining what you might have as a finished piece of work. Before I even clamp the jig to the workpiece in order to drill the holes, I need to make sure I understand where the holes need to be. For this cabinet, I'm going to be making these holes about 1.25 inches from the front edge of the cabinet, but about 2 inches from the back of the cabinet. The reason is the back of the cabinet will sit in about 1/4 inch from the back wall, like this. So I'm going to need the holes here. On the front of the cabinet though, there'll be the face frame, so I only need about 1.25 inches distance here to drill these holes. The other thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that I mark the bottom and the front of each cabinet. This is just to make sure that I don't make any mistakes and I drill the shelf pin holes on the inside of one wall and the outside of the other, or that I don't have any misalignment with the holes in case the saw cut is 1/16 of an inch off. I don't want shelves that wobble once they're set in place. So I'll mark the front and the bottom of the cabinet before I start mounting the jig. Since I know that this is now the bottom of the cabinet and what's facing me is the front of the cabinet, I'll simply take the jig, butt it up against the inside front of the cabinet side, and set it flush at the back edge. Then I'll take my clamp and clamp it to the workpiece. Since I don't need a shelf toward the very bottom of the cabinet or toward the very top of the cabinet because that's just impractical, I'll start about 10 3/4 inches up from the bottom of the cabinet to begin my shelf pins. So I won't make you watch the tedious drilling of all the holes for the shelf pins, but I wanted to point out a specific thing. Once you've drilled the first set of holes and you need to move the jig up, you simply take the shelf pin, or one of the shelf pins that you'll be using, and you line it up with one of the existing holes. And you simply insert it. This keeps the jig from moving back and forth. And to keep it from coming away from the work, I'm simply going to clamp it again. Then I'll continue to drill the rest of my holes on this side. Now what I do is I flip the cabinet piece over so that the bottom is facing to my right. I simply flush up the jig again, clamp it down, and then I'll start again at 10 3/4 inches, and I'll make the holes all the way going to my left. This time though, since I know that the back of the cabinet is facing me, I have to make sure that I use the second set of indexing holes, not the first. Otherwise, I won't be able to get a shelf pin in here because the back will probably be blocking it. I'll set this aside and repeat it for the other side of the shelf, making sure that I do the side that matches this side and not on the outside of the other piece. Now that I've completed drilling the holes in the sides of the cabinets to receive the shelf pins, the next step in the process is to drill the pocket holes that'll be used to join the pieces of the cabinets together, as well as anchor the face frame to the front of the cabinet. In order for me to do this successfully, I've got to have a little help. The first thing I use is a pocket hole drilling jig. As you can see here, I've mounted mine to this piece of plywood to make it easier for me to anchor to the table. The jig is basically composed of a couple of different parts. The first part is this clamp that's used to lock the workpiece in place so that it doesn't move while I'm making the hole. The second is this drilling guide that gets attached here to the top of the jig, and again is all held in place by the clamp when the workpiece is in place. In order for me to drill the holes, I've got to have this special drilling bit. It's basically a same diameter drill bit up until a certain point, and I'll walk closer to the camera because I don't have my cameraman today to help zoom. Anyway, the diameter of the bit is the same up until it gets to this shoulder, and then it narrows in to basically drill the rest of the hole to receive the screw that goes into the pocket hole. The reason that this is done is the shoulder, once it's drilled out, holds the head of the pan screw in place to draw the two pieces of wood together. The last thing that I use is basically a square bit. I prefer square drive bits to non-square drive bits because they slip a lot less. This is basically a longer number 2 square drive bit that I insert into the drill that'll be used later to drive the pocket screws. I take a simple clamp in order to hold this workpiece to the table so that it doesn't move while I'm doing the drilling. The first set of pocket holes I'm going to drill are going to be towards the front of the cabinet so that I will be able to attach the face frame later. Make sure you drill into the right side of the cabinet. For us, I've got the shelf pin holes on one side, so I'll put the pocket holes on the other. For each side of the cabinet, I only need to put pocket holes toward the front where the face frame will be attached. I simply clamp the work in place, put the drill in the bit, put the bit in the drill, and then I make my holes. You only need to make them about every 6 inches. There's some people out there who make them really tight and other ones who make them much further away. It's a very strong set of joinery technique as it is. You don't really need much more than every 6 inches or so. As as you can see, there's the pocket hole that'll be used to drive a screw through to anchor the face frame to the front of the cabinet. Now what I'm going to do is I'll drill these on this side of the cabinet, and then I'll take the other side and drill the same thing. I completed drilling the holes in both sides of the cabinet. Now I'm going to drill the pocket holes for the back. In order to do this, I simply pick the side that I do not like, or I like the least, and I'll drill pocket holes along the length of each of the sides in the back. And these will be used to drive screws through to anchor the back to the sides of the cabinet. With the back of the cabinet pocket holes drilled on each side, now it's time for the top and the bottom. For the top and the bottom, I'm going to need pocket holes to attach it to the back, to both sides, and then again some holes in the front to attach the face frame so that the face frame is anchored all the way around on all four sides of the cabinet. So all I need to do is put about 3 holes on each side and a couple of holes at each end, and then I'll be done. And I repeat this process for the top as well as the bottom. With the pocket holes drilled, it's time to put the cabinet together. The way I'm going to assemble this cabinet is I'm going to put the bottom attached to one side, then I'm going to attach the top to that same side, then I'll attach the other side, then I'll attach the back. The reason I do this will become clear in a minute. The way I'm going to attach the bottom to the side of the cabinet here is I make sure that where I marked on the bottom earlier is still facing me. I'm going to make sure that the front edge of this piece of the bottom is flush with the front edge of the side. The second thing I do is I know that my cabinet face frames are 2 inches wide. So I want to make sure that the bottom is installed in a way that allows me to cover it completely with the face frame. In order to do that, I've cut an 1.25 inch spacer block that I'm going to clamp to the bottom underside of the cabinet so that I can just rest the bottom shelf on that in order to screw it in. With the spacer block clamped into place, I'm going to take this specialized clamp, which is flat on one end and has a barrel on the other end designed to fit neatly in a pocket hole. This is going to allow me to hold the bottom shelf really tight with the side shelf so that I can screw it in and the work isn't going to wobble. I make sure that these edges are flush. Insert the barrel end into the pocket hole and clamp it tight. With that done, I can take a couple of pocket screws and attach the bottom to the side. When you're screwing in the pocket screw, if you've never done it before, what you'll want to feel for when you're driving the screw down is you'll feel an initial bump when it stops and the pan head of the screw hits the shoulder of the pocket hole. Once you've hit that point, you'll just want to make about a half a turn more to tighten everything up. There it was. And a half a turn more. And then it's snug. Now I'm ready to attach the top of the cabinet to one of the sides. The way I do that is I just want to make sure it's about 1/2 inch down from the top, for the same reason that I want the back recessed about 1/4 inch from the back. This is in case there's any anomaly or waves in the ceiling that I need to adjust for when I'm installing the cabinet. Now that the top and bottom are attached to the side of the cabinet, I'll simply flip it over and attach them to the other side of the cabinet. The last part of the assembly is the back. I simply flip this over onto its face so that I can fit the back into place. If you remember, we drilled pocket holes on each side of the back piece. The reason I installed the top and the bottom first was so that the back had something to rest on, so that it would be easier to install. Before I attach the back to the sides, I want to make sure that the cabinet is square. Now generally, if your saw is square and you've cut on a square angle, this isn't going to be much of a problem. The way we check for square is we measure the diagonal from one end of the box to the other on both sides, and if they're equal, then I know my cabinet is square. If one is longer than the other one, then I'm simply going to try to squeeze the longer end in so that they equal out. And I'm reading 43 7/8. And 43 7/8. So this cabinet is square. I don't have to put any additional clamping pressure to bring it into square. So all I'm going to do is simply screw in using pocket screws. With the back attached, the last part is simply to drive 2 screws from the bottom and the top into the back of the cabinet to make sure it's secured all the way around. Well, there you have it. Our 2 end cabinet carcasses are complete. In the next video, we'll assemble the center cabinet, which has a little bit different joinery technique than we used on the first 2 cabinets, although it could be done exactly the same. Then we'll attach the face frame to the cabinets, and then we'll put the 2 end panels on, and the cabinet will be complete. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope you join us next time. Thanks.